The air inside the Maricopa County Superior Court in Phoenix, Arizona, carried a weight that pressed against the chest, not from the desert heat outside but from a deeper, unspoken truth that had rooted itself in the courthouse walls over decades. Everyone who passed through the glass and steel entrance knew how things worked in Judge Evelyn Warwick's courtroom. She was the kind of judge who rarely lowered her reading glasses, her piercing gaze slicing through attorneys like a blade through paper. Her voice, calm but laced with steel, silenced any who dared challenge her. Warwick had ruled this courtroom for 24 years, long enough to etch her name into the legal community, not with admiration but with fear, whispered in hushed tones at bar association dinners and over coffee in law firm break rooms. Attorneys, especially Latino attorneys, knew the odds were stacked against them when their case landed in her docket. Her rulings had a pattern, never overt enough to prove but clear enough to feel, and today that pattern would face its reckoning. Mateo Vargas stepped into the courtroom, his polished loafers tapping against the polished tile floor. He'd been here before, but today was different. He wasn't just another defense attorney standing before Judge Warwick. He wasn't just a name on the docket. Today, he carried something she couldn't anticipate. At 46, Mateo had carved out a reputation taking on the cases others avoided, cases where the system had already decided the outcome. His name echoed beyond Arizona, known for dismantling prosecution cases with surgical precision. That made him a target for judges like Warwick, but it never deterred him. What did pause him, just for a moment, was the look in her eyes as he approached the defense table. She despised him, not for the case, not for his words, but for who he was. Mateo felt the gravity of the moment settle on him. This wasn't just about his client, Luis Navarro, a man wrongfully accused of assault with a deadly weapon. This wasn't just about innocence. This was about exposing a machine that had crushed people like Luis for decades, and Mateo wasn't leaving without tearing it open. "Mr. Vargas?" Judge Warwick said, barely glancing up from her papers, her tone dripping with dismissal. "You're already on notice in my courtroom. Don't waste my time today." There was no cause for the remark. They hadn't even begun. Mateo's grip tightened on his leather briefcase, but his face remained a mask of calm. "I'll keep that in mind, Your Honor." Warwick's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Good. My docket is full, and I have no patience for theatrics." She turned to the prosecution, a smug assistant district attorney named Connor Reed, barely 3 years out of law school, eager to curry favor with the judge. "The state is ready, Your Honor," Reed said, shooting a glance at Mateo as if the case was already won. Of course they were ready. They were always ready when the defendant was a Latino man, Mateo thought. His client, Luis, sat beside him, shoulders slumped, hands clasped tightly, the posture of someone who'd been ground down by the system's gears. Mateo leaned in slightly. "We're ready too," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Judge Warwick let out a sharp exhale. "Let's move this along." The trial began, but it wasn't a trial, it was a performance with Warwick as the director. Every objection Mateo raised was swatted down without consideration. Every time Reed fumbled a legal point, Warwick steered him back on track, her tone almost maternal. The jury noticed. The gallery, packed with community members and a few reporters, noticed too. But no one dared speak. Except Mateo. He watched her closely. The way her jaw tightened when he spoke, the way her disdain was barely veiled. It wasn't just bias. It was personal, and it was a mistake. Warwick wasn't even trying to hide it. Each time Mateo opened his mouth, she cut him off. Each valid argument he raised, she dismissed with a flick of her wrist. The courtroom had a rhythm. Lawyers argued, judges ruled, juries listened. But here Warwick had scripted the verdict before the gavel fell. Mateo caught the jury's unease, the way they shifted in their seats. Even jurors who might have walked in with their own biases couldn't ignore the spectacle. But Warwick pressed on, her words sharper with each exchange. "Mr. Vargas, you're trying my patience," she snapped after his third objection. "Mr. Vargas, one more baseless motion, and I'll hold you in contempt." And then, "Mr. Vargas, this isn't a stage for your grandstanding. Do that on your own time." Mateo kept his composure, but inside, He was coiled, not from her insults. He'd heard worse, but because she was making it personal, exposing herself with every word. He needed her to keep going, to dig her own grave. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady. "The prosecution just introduced a witness statement not disclosed in discovery. That's a clear violation of Brady v. Maryland. I move for a mistrial." Warwick leaned back, adjusting her glasses with theatrical boredom. "Denied." Mateo let a beat pass, strategic, not surprised. "To clarify, Your Honor, you're refusing to address a Brady violation?" Her lips pursed. "I said denied, Mr. Vargas." The courtroom stirred. Reporters scribbled faster. Whispers rippled through the gallery. She felt it too, her eyes narrowed. "You're treading on thin ice." "For what, Your Honor?" Mateo asked, his tone even. "Asking the court to uphold the law?" Warwick's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "That's enough," she barked. "One more word, and you're out of here." The room fell silent. Mateo could hear Luis's shallow breathing beside him. "Don't let her do this," Luis whispered, his voice raw. Mateo didn't respond. He didn't need to. This was exactly where he wanted her. He sat, expression unreadable, letting Warwick think she'd won. But she hadn't. She'd just handed him the stage. Warwick straightened, her voice icy. "Mr. Reed, proceed with your witness." Connor Reed, visibly rattled, cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to the witness stand, where a nervous convenience store clerk, Mr. Delgado, sat, eyes darting. "Mr. Delgado, can you confirm that the defendant, Luis Navarro, was the man you saw during the assault?" Delgado hesitated, his fingers twisting in his lap. Mateo leaned forward slightly. He knew that hesitation, the kind that came when someone had been coached but wasn't sure. Warwick didn't tolerate hesitation. "Answer the question," she snapped. Delgado flinched. I think it was him." Mateo stood. "Objection, Your Honor. I think is not a definitive identification." "Overruled," Warwick said, barely pausing. Mateo exhaled, shaking his head just enough for the jury to see. He let Reed stumble through more questions before taking the floor for cross-examination. He approached the witness stand, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Delgado, you said you think you saw my client. How certain are you?" Delgado swallowed. I thought it was him, but..." Warwick cut in. "Move on, Mr. Vargas." Mateo turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "Your Honor, I'd like the witness to clarify his statement." "I said move on," she hissed. "For the record," Mateo said, his voice clear, "you're preventing the witness from answering a critical question." Warwick's face twitched, a crack in her armor. "I'm warning you, Mr. Vargas." Mateo gave a faint nod. "Understood, Your Honor." He turned back to Delgado. "No further questions." He walked back to the defense table, deliberate, feeling the room's tension coil tighter. Warwick knew she was losing control, and Mateo knew it was time. He reached into his briefcase, fingers grazing the folder that held her undoing. And then, the courtroom doors swung open. The heavy glass doors parted with a thud, and every head turned. 2 federal agents in crisp suits marched in, their steps echoing with purpose. The room froze, the silence swallowing every rustle and whisper. Mateo smoothed his tie, hands steady on the table. Judge Warwick's eyes flickered, confusion, then irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. The lead agent, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, flashed her badge. "Judge Evelyn Warwick, we need to speak with you immediately." Warwick's jaw clenched. "I'm conducting a trial." "It's urgent," the agent said, unflinching. Mateo watched as confusion in Warwick's eyes edged toward fear, quickly masked by her usual arrogance. She squared her shoulders. "This is unacceptable. Whatever this is, it will wait until I've concluded these proceedings." The second agent stepped forward, addressing the room. "This is a federal matter. It cannot wait." Whispers erupted in the gallery. Even the jury, sworn to silence, exchanged glances. Connor Reed cleared his throat. Uh, should we take a recess, Your Honor? Warwick's fingers dug into the bench. No, she snapped. We are not taking a recess. The defense has disrupted this court enough, and I won't. Judge Warwick, the lead agent interrupted. We have a warrant for your arrest. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, the scratch of reporters' pens. For the first time in 24 years, Evelyn Warwick lost her grip on her courtroom. Mateo let the moment linger, let its weight settle into every corner. Then, slowly, he stood, turning to the jury, the gallery, the reporters, and finally to her. Your Honor, he said, voice steady. I believe you denied my motion for a mistrial, but it seems this trial is no longer your concern. Warwick's face drained of color. The lead agent produced a folded document. Evelyn Warwick, you are under arrest for bribery, abuse of judicial power, obstruction of justice, and violations of federal civil rights laws. The gallery erupted again. Some shocked, some triumphant. The jury sat frozen, eyes darting between Mateo and the judge. Warwick's gaze locked onto Mateo, and for the first time, she saw him, not as an irritant, but as the man who had orchestrated her fall. Mr. Vargas, she said, her voice unsteady. This is your doing. Mateo lifted his chin. This is accountability, he corrected. For everyone you've silenced. The agent moved to the bench. Judge, please stand. Warwick hesitated, then complied. When the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the sound reverberated like a gavel. The courtroom wasn't just watching, it was witnessing a reckoning. For 24 years, Evelyn Warwick had ruled with an iron fist. Attorneys feared her. Defendants knew hope was a luxury. The system had shielded her, ignoring her biased rulings, her contempt for people like Mateo Vargas. But now, she stood where she'd condemned countless others. Wrists bound, power gone. Mateo had spent years building this case, tracking every bribe, every manipulated ruling, every case she'd twisted. He'd been patient, knowing her arrogance would be her downfall. Today it was. The lead agent read the charges aloud. Evelyn Warwick, you are under arrest for multiple violations of the Civil Rights Act, bribery, obstruction of justice, and abuse of judicial power. You have the right to remain silent. Warwick tried to speak, but her voice faltered. This is a mistake, she muttered. Take it up with your attorney, the agent replied. The gallery buzzed, reporters capturing every detail, Warwick's trembling hands, her diminished presence. A court officer, who had served under her for years, held the door as she was let out, a final indignity. The doors closed and she was gone. The courtroom hummed with disbelief and satisfaction. Mateo exhaled, hands resting on the table. Luis Navarro turned to him, eyes wide. Man, I thought people like her were untouchable. Mateo glanced at the empty bench. No one's untouchable, he said. Not when you fight smart. But the fight wasn't over. Luis was still in cuffs, the trial Warwick had rigged unfinished. Mateo turned to Connor Reed, who looked like he'd aged a decade in minutes. Reed's confidence, propped up by Warwick's favor, was gone. Mateo cleared his throat, addressing the replacement judge, a seasoned woman with a reputation for impartiality, rushed in to take over. Your Honor, given recent events, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. The new judge, Judge Elena Torres, leaned forward. On what grounds, Mr. Vargas? Mateo faced the jury. This trial was tainted from the start. Judge Warwick's arrest confirms what we've known. She was never impartial. Her rulings were biased, evidence was suppressed, and my client was denied a fair trial. With her in custody, the only just action is to undo her damage. Judge Torres studied him, then nodded. I agree. A heavy silence fell. The charges against Luis Navarro are dismissed. Bailiff, remove his restraints. The courtroom held its breath. The bailiff unlocked Luis's cuffs, and for the first time in years, his hands were free. The weight of the moment hit hard, Luis's eyes glistened, but he held it together. Connor Reed sat silent, staring at his notes, knowing he'd lost more than a case. Luis turned to Mateo, voice low. I don't know how to thank you. Mateo clapped his shoulder. Live free. That's enough. Luis stood, taking in the courtroom that had nearly broken him, then walked out. Mateo followed, the victory bittersweet. This wasn't just about Luis. It was about every case Warwick had tainted, every life she'd upended, every bribe she'd pocketed. This was the start, not the end. Mateo had won today, but tomorrow the work continued. There were more Warwicks out there, more courtrooms where justice was a game. He wasn't done. If you believe in holding power accountable, don't just watch, speak up, stand up, fight back.